Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is daf Zayin of Shevuot. Let me share my screen and we'll get started. So uh, we have been discussing in the opening Mishnah of our Masechet, we learned that one is subject to a korban olav yored. That's a variable korban dependent on how wealthy you are. But it's a sin offering. If one was aware that one was tameh, forgot, and either ate kodesh, meaning they ate part of a sacrifice. If they're a kohen, then it could be a variety of different sacrifices. In general, for Yisrael, it would be a shlamim. And then, or they entered the Beit Hamikdash
Right.
forgetting that they were Tameh, and then they remembered. So as a result, they left the Beit Hamikdash and said, "Oh my gosh, I forgot that I was supposed to go to, to the mikvah to offer an offer, to go through the process of Tara, and I had meant to do that first, but I didn't, and so it was a total accident." But nonetheless, we have a sense of responsibility, even if we do something by so to speak by accident. And so as a result, we one is obligated in that kind of offering. So the Gemara is now asking, as we pick up at the two dots on the 11th line from the bottom of Vav Amud, the Gemara is now going to ask, how is it that we know that these are the only cases that this variable sacrifice is required in connection with Tum'ah? Because the Psukim just say, do we have a Chumash handy here? No, not, 1 second here. Yes, we do. Hold on just a second. The Psukim just say, here it is. The Psukim are not clear as to what it's talking about. It says, is Perek Hey of Vayikra, pasuk bet, o nefesh asher tiga b'chol davar tamei, or somebody who touches something tamei, o benivlas chaya tmeya, or maybe it's an animal that has died, o benivlas behema tmeya, or a domesticated animal that's died, o benivlas sheretz tamei, or some kind of creepy crawly thing, v'ne'elam mimenu, and then he forgot, v'hu tamei, and he's tamei, v'ashem, and he is guilty. So what is the guilty? What's he guilty of?
Yeah.
And then it continues, Ochi yiga betumas adam, or maybe he even, touched some person who was tameh, l'chol tumaso, at whatever level of tuma it's involved. Asher yutma, that could be tameh. V'ne'elam mimenu, and again, he doesn't know, he didn't realize, he forgot. V'hu yada v'ashem, and he now knows, and he feels guilty. So what is he supposed to do? But what did he do? Right? On some level, it's completely not clear. You mean one might have even thought that this was some kind of prohibition about becoming tameh altogether, but that's not true. We know that generally it's just the Kohanim, possibly with Nazirim, that are prohibited to become tameh. And so, what's the story? So let's take a look in the Gemara, and we're going to try and prove that those psukim are talking about becoming tameh and then eating kodesh or entering the Beit Hamikdash. So et sheyesh ba yediyah b'tchila, and we said that what you need to have is you need to have a sense of knowledge. You need to know that you were tameh originally. Then you forget, and then you remember. So harei zeh ba'olav yored. That's the person who is going to be subject to olav yored. So Tana Rabbanan, minayin she'ena kasam medaber ela betumas mikdash v'kodeshav. How do I know that this pasuk is only referring to tuma and then entering the Beit Hamikdash, or eating some kodesh? V'dinhu, we can make it. It's a logical conclusion. However, v'his here v'anash al hatuma, because there is a warning and punishment with respect to tuma, meaning in a case if you did it on purpose and you did these things, v'chayev korban al hatuma, And so, and we know that if you do it by accident, you will be obligated to have a sacrifice, as Rashi puts it, second to last narrow line, end of the line in Rashi. Ho v'hizir v'anish al hazadon tuma, because you're going to be punished in connection with doing something intentionally with respect to tameh. V'chayavin nami korban al shigigas tuma, and then as we noted, you're also going to be liable for doing it accidentally with respect to a korban. Mamatzinu, we can make a mamatzinu that we can say that the cases are all comparable. Kisha his here. Anash kares al zadon, that when the pasuk is telling us that you are, and warns us that, and gives us the penalty that you're going to get kares with respect to an intentional sin, zadon tuma bitumas mikdash v'kodshav his here v'anash, it's talking about the making tameh the Beit Hamikdash, or being tameh and eating kodesh. So as a result, and that's where it is the warning and the punishments are listed. Shenemar, because it says this is in Vayikra Kaf Aleph, and we have to change the wording a little bit as noted in the Masoras Hashas as we pick up with the second wide line in Rashi. Lo yitamu es machanehem hareze as hara mikdash. That's the warning that you don't go into the Beit Hamikdash while you're tameh. V'kodshim lo yochal ad asher yitaher. And then similarly, now in Vayikra Kaf Bet, it says that you shouldn't go into you shouldn't eat the kodesh when until you become tahor. And so that is the warning, Hareyas Haras Kodesh. That's the warning for eating Kodesh. So those are the two warnings, Vayikra Kaf Aleph and Vayikra Kaf Bet. And now, where are the punishments? Rashi's going to tell us. Ki es mikdash Hashem timei v'nika reis, that in Bamidbar Yutet, in connection with, at the very beginning of Parshas Chukas, it tells us the laws of becoming tahor, of how the para aduma. But if you don't, it says that you're going to be, you'll go into the Beit HaMikdash and while you're tameh, and you will get kares. Harei onesh mikdash. That's the punishment for the Beis HaMikdash. V'hanefesh asher tochal basar mizbeach hashlamim, excuse me. So, and then similarly, it refers to, and this is in Vayikra Zayin, that it refers to this person who eats from the mizbeach, from the shlamim, while they're tameh. And again, it says that the person is going to get kares, harei onish kodesh. So that shows that that's the punishment for eating kodesh. So we see that there is a warning about doing these things intentionally. And we know that if you do them unintentionally, you will have to bring a korban. So we'll say that just as the things that you have to do intentionally are subject to the punishment of kares, and so if you do them unintentionally, they will be the things that we're talking about here that are subject to the punishment of a korban olah v'yorei. So makasha hizir, and back into the Gemara. So again, we're now 1, 2, 3, 4. Where is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 lines up. Second word from the end of the line. Makasha hizir v'anash al hatuma. So just as you're warned when it comes to and have a punishment when it comes to tuma, lo hizir v'anash ella al tumas mikdash v'kodashav. It's referring to making the Beis HaMikdash tameh, or eating the holy food while you're tameh. Similarly, when we say that there's going to be some kind of sacrifice about tuma, and we don't know what kind of tuma it refers to, lo chayev ella al tumas mikdash v'kodashav. It must be these two things. But the Gemara is not convinced. Ve'ema truma. There is a third category of something that you may eat while you are tameh, and it is subject to a penalty, and therefore maybe it should also be covered by this pasuk at the very beginning of Perek Hey Vayikra. There's also a warning and a punishment with respect to eating truma. The warning and the punishment is not necessarily the same level as the punishment of kares. It's the punishment of death at the hands of heaven, but still, maybe we should apply it as well. No, lo ashkechan misa dechayav alei korban. No, we don't see that something that's punishment with death by the hands of heaven, that is going to be subject to a sin offering if you do it accidentally. And so as a result, that's not enough. Lo, as Rashi says, last line in last line in Rashi on Daf Vav Amabet, lo ashkechon avon misa demechayev karbon she'ein chatas ba ela al shigigas kares. That when it or chayev misa bidei adam, that the only situations where you are going to have to offer a sin offering is if it's something that's subject to kares or worse. And as bad as death at the hands of heaven sounds, it's not as bad as kares or misa bidei beis din. So kida amrin behorios. So we will see, as we will see in horios. But the point is that this is a limitation, and it's not going to. So we're not likely to have a sin offering. So ema hani mili karban kavua. So no, I'm sorry. So lo ashkech. So ema hani. So yeah. So the Gemara now picks up the last line on Vavam Mebet. So ema hani mili karban kavua. Maybe that this is telling us that you have that when it comes to the fixed korban, that's where one is going to be, meaning a fixed korban, meaning a traditional sin offering where there's no option of a less expensive version for those who are poorer. And so maybe as we turn now to Zion Amud Aleph, aval olav yored nesei midi dahava ashmiya ashmias kolva abitoy sfasayim. Maybe the variable offering is only in connection with I'm sorry, maybe the restriction to not having a sin offering in connection with something that is not subject to kares or worse is only true when you're doing a traditional sin offering. But when aval olav yored nesei, but maybe you could bring a variable offering. Midi dahava ashmias kol va'abituis v'sayim. After all, the first pasuk aleph of Parakeh in Vayikra specifically notes the fact that we're talking about. Let me get to it. Specifically notes that. Specifically notes the nefesh kisechatav v'sham akol Allah v'hu aid. So somebody has has called you to serve as a witness. O ra'a o yada, whether you saw something or knew something. Im lo yagiv v'nasav no. And then you don't tell the person, you fail to serve as a witness, and we find out, the additional details is that you swear accordingly, right. And now you're going to be subject to a karban olav yored. But that's not something that is subject to kares if you do it intentionally. And similarly, when we have a Shevuot, a bitoy or bitoy sfasayim, where one swears falsely about doing something in the future or not doing something in the future, or failing or having done something in the past, or swears falsely about having not done something in the past, where again that is going to be subject to this korban olav yored, and yet it seems like that's a lesser sin that maybe so therefore maybe it's lesser sins you can have a korban olav yored. So amar kra, but no, the pasuk itself says ba through it in Vayikra Parak Hey pasuk Gimel. O ki yagab betumas adam l'chol tumaso asher yitma ba, suggesting some kind of limitation. Ba lema'ute truma. No, that ba comes to exclude truma. Now, in the end, we are going to say that this does not work. So ema ba lemeute mikdash. Maybe we should say that the ba should come to exclude going into the Beit HaMikdash and eating kodesh. Delo sagile bekarban olav yored, because maybe it's not enough to give a korban olav yored. Those are worse sins. Ademaisi korban kavua. You that in fact you need to bring a korban, a traditional korban chatas in order for it to work. And so as a result, maybe it's so bad that only, it's the exact opposite direction. Only with respect to eating truma while tameh do you have this korban olav yored, and the other things, namely violating the Beit HaMikdash because you're tameh, or eating kodesh while you're tameh, are so bad that we're going to say that you need to bring a regular korban chatas. No, kari rabba ale de rabbi. So we're going to set the Rebbe. So we're going to cite now Rava teaching us a lesson that Rebbe said, and the Rava was so impressed with this lesson that he said about Rebbe, Dole mayim miboros amukim. He was drawing water from deep wells. Titania. So what was the thing that he taught? What was the brisa that Rebbe taught? He taught the following. Rebbe says, Ekra ani chaya. That when I read that pasuk in Perek Hey, pasuk Bet and Gimel of Vayikra, first it talks about Mikol Behema Asher Al Haaretz, and so I'm sorry. Where is it? I should have just left my chumash open. It says. This is a Perek pasuk Bet. O nefesh asher tiga b'chol davar tamei, o benivlas chayat meya, o benivela nivlas behema meya. So it references both chaya and behema. Now, sometimes chaya can mean just wild animals, but here the Rebbe says ekra ani chaya, that the pasuk says chaya. So behema lama nemram, because chaya could also be understood to mean all kinds of animals, whether domesticated or wild. So why did it need to bother to tell us behema? So the answer is that it's teaching us a gezerah shava. Nemar kan behema tmeya. Here in Perek Hey pasuk Bet of Vayikra, it says behema tmeya in connection with the variable offering, with the korban olav yored. V'nemar lahalan behema tmeya, but it also says behema tmeya in Perek Zayin of Vayikra pasuk kav aleph, where it says v'nefesh ki siga b'chol tamei b'tumas adam o behema tmeya. And that pasuk is explicitly talking about eating kodesh. So malahalan tumas kodesh, afkan tumas kodesh. So just as over there where it says behema tameh, it's talking about becoming tameh and eating kodesh. So too, clearly, this korban of olav yored is talking about becoming tameh and eating kodesh. So
when I read behema tameh, I think of something like a donkey.
Yes. Yeah, okay. So that excellent point that that you are highlighting. Often, this is one of the reasons that you always need a teacher in connection with Gemara, because there are some words and phrases that have multiple meanings in multiple different contexts. So often, behema tameh just means a non-kosher animal. And that absolutely, and it could mean that. But it also could mean, and in this context does mean, an animal that is a source of tumah. And that just means any nivela of basically almost any kind of animal will be exactly that. And so that the idea of that pasuk is to say, Perek Zayin pasuk of Aleph in Vayikra, is to say that if you were to eat a shlamim after having touched a dead animal, a dead large animal that wasn't slaughtered properly and therefore conveys a level of tumah, so then you would be subject to the penalty that it details there, that there's the korban that it details there, or the situation that it details there in Perek Zayin Pasuk Kaval. And so because of the Gzeira Shava back to the Korban Olav Yored, so we're going to say that both situations are talking about the same sin. Again, namely the idea of eating Kodesh while you're Tameh. So Ashkechan Tumas Kodesh, Tumas Mikdash Minalan. So okay, so where were we? We are, the effort that we began with, the question that we began with is, how do we know that the variable offering at the beginning of Perek Hey of Vayikra applies to both entering the Beis Hamikdash while Tameh and eating Kodesh while Tameh? Well, this Gzeira Shava of Rebbe teaches us about the eating Kodesh, but we still need to show that going into the Beis Hamikdash is a problem. So we're going to try now several different efforts to accomplish that. Let's see, how many efforts are we going to try? We are going to try 4 different efforts before we find the successful one. So this is where we are right now on the screen. You can see the question. Again, this shows that that a variable offering applies to Kodesh, but how do we know that the variable offering also applies to entering the Beis Hamikdash while Tameh? So let's try. First try. So Amar Kra. So the Torah tells us, B'chol Kodesh lo tiga ve'el Mikdash lo tavo, that you shall not go. You shall not touch any Kodesh. By the way, we've I think already seen over the course of the last few weeks that B'chol Kodesh lo tiga actually refers to eating, but and it talks about touching. But this is actually this past week's parsha. This is talking about the newborn mother, that she's not allowed to touch any sacred food or go into the Beit HaMikdash. Itgash Mikdash l'Kodesh. So these two things, these two concepts of going into the Beit HaMikdash and touching Kodesh, are all in this one verse. So that shows a connection between them. And so maybe we can say that this pasuk is telling us that, whenever you see a law about eating Kodesh, you know what? That law also applies to going into the Beit HaMikdash. That doesn't work, because ihachi trumanami. Because you know what? That verse, because to Amar Mar, B'chol Kodesh lo tiga, because we saw this was actually in Makos. That's why I said a few weeks ago in Makos Yudalid Amabet. Although we saw a long time ago, apparently in Yevamos, but B'chol Kodesh lo tiga l'rabos es hatruma, that not touching any sacred food also includes truma. So if you're going to tell me that you're going to use this pasuk to connect entering the Beis Hamikdash with eating Kodesh, well, we should also use this pasuk to connect eating Kodesh like a korban to eating Kodesh like truma. So Hami at Rachmanabah. No. Don't forget, we have this thing that we're going to use to exclude the word ba. So Ema ba l'me'ute mikdash. Well, 1 second. How do you know which thing to exclude? So right now, through this pasuk of B'chol Kodesh lo tiga ve'el hamikdash lo tavo, we've connected 3 different things. We've connected eating Kodesh to eating truma and to entering the Beit HaMikdash. But how do we know which of the 2 new things is it? Because Rebbe, remember, has taught us that eating Kodesh is definitely one of the things that you're going to be subject to a korban olav yored. So now we need to add one more thing from this pasuk, because we have an addition, we have all 3 being connected, and we have an exclusion of the word ba. So which one do we include and which do we exclude? That's the Gemara's discussion right now. So Ema ba l'me'ute mikdash, but maybe we could say that the thing that we're excluding is entering the Beis HaMikdash. And mistabra mikdash lo mima'atin shekain b'charis kamosa. Maybe we should say no, that in fact the mikdash is not the one that we should exclude, because if you look at eating Kodesh and entering the Beis HaMikdash, they're both subject to kares. So on a penalty level, they are close cousins. And so as a result, if we got to add something, let's add mikdash. But the Gemara says, no, adarabba, truma, lo mima'atinan, shekain achila kamosa. But there's another way that you can look at these things, not based on what the penalty that you get, but on what you're doing. Entering is the different than eating. And so when you look at Truma and Kodesh, those are both about eating. And so maybe we should say that we should connect the two things that are about eating. So as a result, we reject this first answer, and we now need, again, to go back to the question of we need a source that entering the mikdash while tameh is the second thing for which one is going to be subject to a korban ola v'yored. Ela amarava shlosh krisos b'shlamim lama. No, so let's go back and let's take a look. We have 3 times the Torah tells us that you're subject to a kares penalty if you eat a shlamim offering while you are tameh. Achas l'klal, 1 is a general rule to tell us not just about the shlamim, that's true, but anybody who eats any sacrifice that's kodesh is going to be subject. But achas leprat, and 1 is for the specific case of the shlamim. And this is not a klal uprat, this is a uklal, but rather this is a kol davar shahaya bechlal v'yatsa min haklal ulamed lo ulamed al atzmo yatsa el ulamed al haklal kula yatsa. So that the point is that when we then say it a second time, it's telling us that it's teaching us something about the general statement, namely that sacred offerings refers specifically to something like a shlamim, in that it is something offered on the altar. And so as a result, that's it. We need to, when we say that it's subject to all sacrifices, it's got to be something that's offered on the altar. And then there's one more reference to kares. And what are we going to do with that? Well, then we're going to use im eno inyan. Ve'enu yodea mahu, mahi. And I don't know what this third case of kares is referring to. So haviyamar tumas hek kodesh. So let's say it's talking about that it's making tameh and being tameh and eating food, but that can't be because it's already, we already have it. The imeno inyan latumas kodesh denav galem in the Rebbe, but we already know the fact that the tumas kodesh is subject to and korban ola v'yored in connection with because of Rebbe's lesson, Rebbe's Gzeira Shava. So as a result, Taneu Inyan Latumas Mikdash. So okay, so we have 3 references to kares. 2 of them we need, 1 of them we don't need. Since it's talking about eating kodesh, and we already know that that's subject to the rule of a korban ola v'yored if you do it unintentionally. So we'll say that entering the mikdash will be what we learn for it. Can't do that because you were using this third reference to kares. But listen, Rabbi Abahu already uses that lesson of the third kares, so we can't use it for that. To Rabbi Abahu, shalosh krisos b'shlamim lama. Why do we have the 3 references to kares? Achas l'klal v'achas l'pras v'achas l'dvarim she'enim nechalim. Again, the Rebbe, and so the third one is l'dvarim she'enim ne'echalin. It's to tell us that if you eat something that's kodesh, that's supposed to go on the base on the altar, like the wood that's supposed to go on the altar, not edible. Don't advise eating it. But if you were to eat it, you would also be subject to the same penalty, of kares, even though it's something that's not edible. Rabbi Shimon to Amar Dvarim she'enim ne'echalim ein chayav en malei kares mishum tuma. And according to Rabbi Shimon, who says that you don't get kares for that, you know what it does? You know what it's referring to? That third kares? That third kares is telling us that when you have a sin offering that is not getting the sprinkling on the outer altar, but rather the sprinkling is happening on the inner altar, that because I'm then even there, if you do that, you're going to also have the sin of eating a korban that is kodesh while you are tameh. And why would I think otherwise? Because I might have thought the following. That Rabbi Shimon says the following. That when it comes to pigel, this is the concept of having in mind the wrong time to eat the a korban, or the wrong place to eat the korban. that is you know or just at least with respect to the place that if you I'm sorry, with respect to the time, that if you have in mind to eat a korban at the wrong time, it becomes invalid immediately. According to Rabbi Shimon, that does not apply to the certain sacrifices that are offered on the inner altar. And what are those sacrifices? So take a look at the last to the widest lines of Rashi. The first of those lines, Chataos hapnimios, Kagon par v'sa'ir shel Yom Kippurim, like the bull and the goat on Yom Kippur, upar Kohen Mashiach, and then also the bull of the Kohen who is anointed, the Kohen Gadol, who sins and accidentally, upar ha'elam davar. And similarly, the bull when the community makes a sin because something was the Sanhedrin makes a mistake. Shetoanin hezia bifnim ala parokas, because that requires sprinkling on the curtain between the kodesh and the kodesh kodeshim, the amizbeach hazahav, and on the golden altar. And so as a result, I might have thought that eating such a korban would not result in the penalty because after all, it's not subject to pigul, and so maybe it's also not subject to this penalty. Even a Rabbi Shimon would say, yes, it is subject to the penalty. So Mishum Tuma Namilo, so Kamash Malan Dimechayev. So in the end, we say that you are chayev. So the bottom line is that we see that whether it's Rabbi Abahu or Rabbi Shimon, there's no question that you are going to be that we need those three kareses to teach us a different lesson. So you can't use the third kares to teach us about entering the Beit HaMikdash. So Ele Amri Nahardai Mishmei de Rava. So the Nahardaim say in the name of Rava that no, what Rava actually meant was Shlosh Tumos Bishlamim Lama. Why does it refer to Tuma 3 times in connection with the Shlamim offering? And he uses the same logic. Achas l'klal, v'achas l'prat, v'achas l'tuma ksuba, v'torah stam, v'eni yadei mahi, heavy omer, tumas kodesh, v'imeno inyan l'tumas kodesh, nafka lemi derebi, tenehu inyan l'tumas mikdash. So again, same lesson, but instead of focusing on the word kares, let's focus on the word tuma. And the same basic principles can apply, that we now say that as a result, all of the different that since we already know about the fact that tuma and eating are going to be subject to a korban olav yored, we'll use the third reference to tuma to tell us that also in connection with entering the Beit HaMikdash, you'll also be subject to the korban olav yored. But at the end of the day, when the Gemara asks, the reason that you need to mention tuma is the same reason that you're mentioning kares, meaning you need to tell me what the sin was in order to tell me what the penalty was. So it only makes sense to reference both of them together. And so Aidi Duboy Lemichtav Kares, look at the Rabbi Abahu, Kasav Nami Tumos, Delo Sagi Labalavahi. But just as we need the word kares to teach the lessons according to Rabbi Abahu, we need those same mentions of Tuma to do the same thing, because without them, we wouldn't know what we're talking about. So Ella Amarava. So as a result, we come to the final actual statement of Rava. And it's interesting that what effectively we're doing is saying, we thought that Rava said number 1. Turns out that wasn't it. So we then said there's another tradition from the Nahardaim that say that what Rava said was thing number 2. But now we're going to say that wasn't working either. So as a result, here's the thing that Rava said, Ella Amar Rava, Asya Tumaso. That actually we have a different Gzera Shava. So we have a Gzera Shava of Behema Tameya that tells us that it's that the korban olav yored refers to eating kodesh when you're tameh. So we're now going to use tumaso, the Gzera Shava of the word his tuma in 2 places in order to teach us in connection with going into the Beis HaMikdash. So what are those 2 places? Ksiv hacha l'chol tumaso. Well, in Perek Hey, Pasuk Gimel of Vayikra, it specifically says l'chol tumaso. It says oki yagam Ki yiga betumas adam l'chol tumaso asher yutma ba v'ne'elam mimenu v'hu yadav Hashem. So we have l'chol tumaso. That word tumaso is there. And where else do we have it? As we turn to Zion Amabet, uksiv hasam, and where else we have it? We have it in Bamidbar Yud pasuk Yud Gimel, where again it's talking about going into the Beis Hamikdash in connection with the beginning of Parshas Chukas. Tamei o tumaso bo. That again, he's going to continue to be tamei. His tuma is still on him. So malahalan tumas mikdash, avkan tumas mikdash. So just as over there in the beginning of Parshas Chukas, it's clear that the context of what we're concerned about is the person entering the Beis Hamikdash. So too, we'll say that the korban olav yored applies to entering the Beis Hamikdash. The elabal lamali. So in second, we've been saying that we have this method of exclusion. The word ba in the pasuk comes to exclude something. But now that instead of using some sort of mamatzinu, of a general comparison of things, we've used two very focused gzerah one in connection with eating kodesh, one in connection with entering the Beis Hamikdash. So now what are we going to do with this ba? We've been saying all along that it comes to exclude something. So what does it do? L'rabos nivlas of tahor. You know what it's coming to tell us? It's coming to tell us that even tuma that you get through a kosher bird. Now, a kosher bird that is not shechted is a unique kind of situation, because unlike other nivelot, if you touch it, you're not going to be tamei. You have to eat it to become tamei. And so as a result, it's distinct. And so as a result, I might have thought that the kinds of tuma that we're talking about are all tumot in which you are become tamei because of some kind of touching. Maybe, and so maybe this is not kind of the situation that's covered. And so as a result, we're going to say, no, that's not the case. Okay, so ha'amrat ba, 1 second, ha'amrat ba miutahu. But 1 second, you said that this is not actually that ba is coming to exclude, but now you're coming to add something. Ba is a specification. That's a limitation. So how in the world are you using a limitation to try and include something extra? So mishum de miuta hu iater. Yes, you're absolutely right. It is an exclusionary language, but it is an exclusionary language that is going to come to add. Now, how does that work? Because it says, ksiv o ki yiga, if you touch something, davar negia in, delavar negia lo. That the Torah specifically says in Perek Hey Pasuk Gimel, o ki yiga betumas adam, that there's some kind of touching. So as a result, that in and of itself constitutes an exclusion, a limitation. It says only with respect to things that are being touched are you going to be subject to this penalty. Davar negia in, davar delavar negia lo. So uksiv ba miuta, and now we have the word ba that is a second limitation. So havi miut akar miut. So you're right. So in fact, we have two exclusions, and when you have two exclusions, it's coming to tell us that something is actually included. And so what is it that we're including? We're including the bird. After all, if we take a look at Rashi, the la bar negia, she'eno mitama b'negia, because a bird, this is 1, 2, 3, fourth line down in the narrow lines of Rashi, that a bird does not convey, a kosher bird does not convey tuma through touching. Ela bebeis habliya, you have to swallow it. Al yedei achila, through eating it. Kediksiv, as it says, Vayikra Perek Yud Zayin Pasuk Tezvav, which actually is this week. That's this week's parsha. Asher tochal nevela trefa v'chibeis begadav if he eats a nevela trefa and he needs to wash his clothing, umukminan la benevelas of tahor, and we set this up. We say that that's referring to eating a tahor bird. Torah's kohanim in the midrash on Vayikra, v'amrinan hasam yochal titma b'maga Talmud Lomer Litam Abba in Vayikra Parak Kabet Pasuk Chet, it says Litam Abba Ein Lecha Ella HaOmer Ba She'ein Lecha Tuma Ella Achilasa. That the idea is that only with respect to a bird, you're going to have, it's not through touching, but rather through eating. So the bottom line is that we've now answered our questions. How do we know that in fact eating going into the Beis Hamikdash is subject to Karban Olav Yored? It's because of it's because of Rava's Gzeira Shava of Tumaso. And how do we know that eating Kodesh is subject to a Karban Olav Yored? It's because of Rebbe's Gzeira Shava of Behemat Meya. So let's take a look. We're going to just finish up. We're going to look at a brisa. It's a long brisa, but it's the brisa is going to be the fundamental piece that we're going to learn next time. And now we're going to say that what was the key element of one's being tamei? It needed to be, you needed to have knowledge of the initially that you were tamei, then you forgot, and then you became known again. But what happens if you never knew again that you were tamei? So you were tamei, you forgot that you were tamei, you went into the Beis Hamikdash. What is there that enables you to get some kind of atonement while you are in this position of having forgotten that you were tamei in the first place? So
regarding the other point, when we had this whole discussion just now about Higiyah, but initially, the beginning of the Mishnah, we were talking about the Tamei Achila and Tamei Nichnas Beit HaMikdash. So now
Nagia is how you became tamei.
From
Ken,
to Nagia.
Ken. The Nagia is how you became tamei, not the process of the violation. The Nagia that we were talking about is how one became tamei, not the violation. Okay, we can talk about it further afterwards, but I want to make sure that we get done the Gemara that we need to.
Okay.
All right. Yesh ba yediyah b'tchila ve'ein ba yediyah b'sof seir hanasa b'fnim. That if in fact you have knowledge in the beginning and you never remember again that you were tamei, you are going to the korban, the goat that is offered on Yom Kippur, and the blood is sprinkled inside the kodesh. On the altar, golden altar, and on the parochet, that is going to be how you are going to receive atonement. So Tana Rabbanan, this is a long brisa. We'll go through the brisa and then we'll conclude. And tomorrow we'll analyze the brisa in more detail. So Tana Rabbanan, v'chiber al kodesh betumos b'nei Yisrael, that he shall effect atonement from the sanctuary for the tumot of the b'nei Yisrael. So what is that? What tumos does that refer to? So yeshli b'inyan zeh havi shalosh tumos. Maybe it refers to the following three tumos, that amazingly this korban is going to give us atonement for tumas avodah zara, the tumas gilui arayis, the tumas shrichas damim. It's the tuma of idolatry, of forbidden unions, and of murder. But avodah zara hu omer, because what does it say in connection with idolatry? L'ma'an tamei es mikdashi, that in fact when you worship an idol, you are contaminating, you are making tamei my mikdash. And begilui arayis hu omer, and when it comes to having improper sexual relations, it says ushamartem es mishmarti levilti asos mechukos hatoevos velotit amu bahem. And this is actually in this week's Parsha that we say this. So we have a nice Daf Yomi coincidence that we say that when it comes to the different abominable things, you shouldn't become tamei as a result of them. And then it goes into the details of the improper relations. Ushvichas damim hu omer. And then when it comes to murder, it says velotitma es haaretz. This is in Bamidbar Parak Lamed Hey Pasuk Lamed Dalid. And so as a result, Yachol Al Gimel Tumos Halalu Yehei Sir Mechaper. Maybe we could say, and this would be a wonderful thing, because then, boy, that would really create atonement for all of the worst sins, that's what it's referring to. No, that doesn't. That's not what it's talking about. Talmud Lomar, mi tumos b'nei Israel, from the tumos of b'nei Israel. It's not every tuma that it gets purified. It's only certain ones. Below kol tumos, not every tuma. Umamatzinu shechalak kasav miklal kol tumos. So when we find that there's some kind of distinction among the various kind of tumos, Heve Omar tumas mikdash v'kodashav. No, the thing that is distinct from the big three sins that are tameh is the classic tuma of the Beis Hamikdash and its holy items. So avkan betumas mikdash v'kodashav. And so as a result, this is only referring to the tuma of the temple and the holy sacrifices. So divrei Rabbi Yehuda, that's Rabbi Yehuda's viewpoint. Rabbi Shimon Omer, we don't need to go through all of that to figure that out. From just the context of that own verse, we know. Because Harehu Omer, v'chiper al hakodesh mitumot. It's when you are atoning for the kodesh from its tumot. So what from the tuma? So kodesh and tuma are right next to each other. What is that referring to? Mitumos shel kodesh. It's specifically kind of telling us that it's the tumot of the kodesh. So yachol al kol tuma shebekodesh yehi sa'ir zeh mechaper. Maybe every kind of tuma it would atone for. So Talmud Lomar, no, meaning even maybe intentionally making tameh the Beis Hamikdash or the korbanot. No, that doesn't work because Talmud Lomar umi pishiehem l'chol chatosam. It's got to be from their rebellious among their transgressions. Chataim dumya to peshayim. It's got to be sins that are similar to rebellious sins. Mapshaim she'enam b'nei korban, just as rebellious sins are not subject to a sin offering, meaning if you do something intentionally, you're not going to be subject to a sin offering because you did it intentionally. So too, the sacrifices that the situations that this is also going to atone for must be situations which don't have a traditional korban chatas. And so what are those situations? They're the situations that we're talking about. Entering the Beis Hamikdash and eating kodesh, which are not subject to a traditional sin offering, but rather are subject to the korban olah v'yored. Uminayan liyesh ba yediyah b'tchila ve'ein ba yediyah b'sof shesayer zet tolah. How do I know that it's the situation where you knew you were tameh and forgot, and you continue to forget that this is where the goat is helping? Talmud Lomar l'chol chatosam. It's all the sin offerings, so all its chataos. Chayav chataos b'mashma. That implies that we're dealing with the situation of sin offerings, and so as a result, meaning something where you didn't do it intentionally, and so as a result, where you don't know about it, that's the situation that we're talking about. And so as a result, the situation where the special sin offering on Yom Kippur is coming to atone is when you've gone into the Beis Hamikdash or eaten kodesh and you didn't remember, and you still haven't remembered that you are in fact tameh. And so we will pick up from there. And now, having quoted this brisa, we're going to go through and analyze each part of it. But for that discussion, stay tuned for tomorrow's daf.
He's not a show. He's not a shogeg.
Say that again, Ken.
He's not a shogeg then.
He's not quite a shogeg because he doesn't remember that he actually sinned. So you're exactly right. He's not. This only atones until the moment that he remembers. As soon as he remembers, now he's going to be also subject to a korban olah v'yored. But at least he should know or feel the comfort when he does remember that at least between when he forgot and when and this moment when he remembered that that thankfully the sacrifice on Yom Kippur will offer some level of atonement for him.
So if he's not a shogeg, he's not chayav a korban then.
Correct, of course, because he does. But remember, he's not going to be chayav a korban because he doesn't know he did anything wrong. He was tameh and he knew he was tameh, but he totally forgot he was tameh, and he still hasn't remembered that he was tameh, and so he's still in the moment of having forgotten. You know, like many things in life, did we fill up the gas tank in the car? Until we go back and actually look at the gas tank in the car to see, well, oh, I see that I didn't remember because I thought I filled it up, but I didn't fill it up. So this person thought that he went to the maybe he thought he went to the mikvah, or thought he went through the process and became tahor, and forgot that now he still hadn't done it, and so in fact he was tamei, and so as a result, now he's still going to get some level of atonement, but he's not subject to any korban because he doesn't remember that he did anything wrong, and only then when he remembers that he does something wrong, so then he'll be subject to the korban olah v'yorei. All right, looking forward to continuing our learning
But
together.
until when?
Sorry?
I mean, how long is he in the state? If he remembers 6 years from now, does he bring the korban then?
I think yes. I think that's right. It's whenever he remembers. That's when the interim period. That's the protection that the korban offers on Yom Kippur.
Well, then maybe on Yom Kippur, when over Yom Kippur, he's mechaper, and he doesn't have to bring it 6 years from now.
So he's only mechaper of the fact that he knew he was tamei and he forgot it. But once he knew he was tamei and forgot it and remembers again, it's a different sin. That is a different nature of sin than knowing and forgetting. So as a result, it's only at that point, I believe, that's my understanding, that only at that point you're going to need a further atonement because now you remember that you did it.
And quickly, what's the issue with the bird, the oaf?
The bird, a kosher bird, does not make you tamei by touching it, and so
only by achila,
only by eating it. Correct. If it's a kosher bird that was not shechted properly, then you are only going to be subject to tuma if you eat it. And so as a result, I might have thought because Pasuk Gimel of Parakeh and Vayikra says touching, so maybe it's only a touching tuma that will cause you to be chayav and korban olah v'yorei. So the double exclusion of touching and ba comes to include the tuma that you get from a kosher bird.
But that's all. But that's only with achila, right? Or no?
Correct. Correct. You have to eat it, and then after you become tamei, then you have to do one of two things. You have to either eat some kodesh or you have to enter the Beis Hamikdash. So the eating of that kosher bird that was not shechted properly is only the process through which you became tamei.
Right.
It isn't the sin itself. The sin itself still remains eating kodesh or entering the Beis Hamikdash while you are in the state of having been tamei through having eaten the bird.
Whereas with the other nevelot, it's
if you touch it.
Tuma al yedei.
Correct. That's exactly correct. All right. Awesome. Thanks. Glad I was able to clarify that. Looking forward to continuing our learning together. Have a great day, everybody.